Welcome to the On-Demand Module 1, Start the Year Off Right with National Geographic Science. This is the first in a series of on-demand modules to help you get started using National Geographic Science, which I will refer to as NG Science throughout the session. Built to target your standards, NG Science is a research-based program that brings science learning to life through the lens of National Geographic. Now that you have NG Science, you may be asking yourself a few questions. What does NG Science offer me and my students to help us succeed? What exactly is a science notebook? What are the 4 levels of inquiry and how are they different? How do I access the online resources? How do I customize NG Science to fit my schedule? During this session, I will help you answer these questions by giving you an overview of the program and all of its components. I'll share the research behind science notebooks as well as a few examples. I will also explain the 4 levels of inquiry and their importance to the program. I'll show you how to access both the student and teacher resources on MyNG Connect. And finally, I will demonstrate to you how to use the lesson planner. Let's get started. With NG Science, students are immersed in the nature of science right from the beginning. Process skills build at each grade level to ensure complete understanding of the nature of science, and this chart shows how these process skills and the nature of science work together to help students think and act like scientists. NG Science also provides students with abundant and relevant hands-on explorations to facilitate a thorough understanding of key science concepts. The 4 levels of inquiry in NG Science are designed to help students build confidence and competence in scientific thought and inquiry. And in NG Science, the 5 E's instructional learning cycle is fully integrated in all levels of inquiry. By being thoughtfully interwoven in each level, the 5 E's help students achieve the highest level of learning in each and every investigation. The big ideas in science are targeted and focused for both teachers and students. Each chapter in each unit centers around one big idea that focuses on your science standards. With NG Science, students build their scientific and content literacy through Become an Expert books and selections that tie directly to the big ideas and the science we see in our world today. Proven reading comprehension strategies are presented to ensure that content learning is deep and lasting. With NG Science, students will build scientific literacy and gain an understanding of the nature of science from real-life National Geographic explorers. Your students will learn that science is a way of knowing. It's empirically based and consistent with evidence. It's subject to change when new evidence presents itself, and it's a creative process. And speaking of National Geographic explorers, the best and most unique resources that we have at National Geographic are the people who are exploring the world, doing science, and making a difference. These people have played a key role in the development of National Geographic Science, and your students will have the opportunity to get up close and personal with their experiences. The NG Science author team is made up of leading experts in the field. Our authors include Dr. Randy Bell, our Nature of Science and Life Science expert, Dr. Malcolm Butler, our Science Notebook and Physical Science expert, Dr. Cathay Kabe Trundle, our Early Childhood and Earth Science expert, Dr. Judy Letterman, our Inquiry expert, and Dr. Nell Duke and Dr. David Moore, our literacy experts who worked to ensure that appropriate content area reading was embedded throughout the program. As I just mentioned, Angie Science has been designed by experts in science education. Under the professional development link on MyNG Connect, you will find author monographs and podcasts where the Angie Science program authors present best practices for teaching that are grounded in current research. Use the study guides with each podcast and monograph to foster professional dialogue around each topic. We will be visiting this page periodically throughout this session. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the nature of science is a big part of the program, so let's take a look at the research behind this key element. The next slide takes you directly to the professional development page you just saw. The session will pause automatically to allow you time to follow the steps on this slide as you strengthen your foundational knowledge in the nature of science by reading Dr. Bell's author monograph. Dr. Bell shares a lot of important information about teaching students the nature of science, beginning with the fact that we teach nature of science to help students develop accurate views of what science is and the types of questions science can answer. Dr. Bell also points out that the nature of science, or ways of knowing, is made up of a few ideas that are most practical in the school setting. Scientific knowledge is based upon evidence. Scientific knowledge can change over time. Creativity plays an important role in science, and background knowledge influences how scientists view data. When it comes to effectively teaching the nature of science, we need to be explicit, connect to content. Angie Science has 3 different component structures across the grades. We will begin by looking at the kindergarten components. We will then move on to 1st and 2nd grade components before looking at 3rd through 5th grade. In kindergarten, all print components for each unit will be housed in a kit like you see here. All of your big books will be found here in the back of the kit. This drawer contains all of your teaching materials, and all of the student books are here. There are 3 units available for kindergarten: Earth, Life, and Physical. And within each of those units, there are 2 parts, as you see here. For each unit, students will be working with 2 big idea big books, 1 per part. A science inquiry write-on, wipe-off big book. They will also have access to 6 Become an Expert books per unit and 6 Explore on Your Own books per unit. You will have 1 teacher's edition for each unit, found in the drawer. The Big Ideas Big Book and Big Idea cards will guide your instruction for the unit. A Science Inquiry Big Book and Write About Science Big Book are also provided to guide the inquiry and writing lessons. In the drawer, you will also find your Learning Masters and Assessment Handbook. And each unit has its own inquiry science kit that contains all of the materials you will need for every inquiry activity in that particular unit. Students will have access to their own accounts on MyNG Connect. Here, they will be able to listen to the Become an Expert books online and play games related to the science they are learning. And of course, you will also have an account that allows you to access all of your Angie Science resources. Each unit in kindergarten follows the same instructional path, which begins with setting up the science notebooks. The students will meet a real National Geographic scientist through the unit launch video. The Big Ideas instruction and science inquiry lessons for Part 1 follow the unit launch. As you see here on the planner page, the inquiry lessons are built right into instruction. Now it's time to read the informational text that corresponds to that part of the unit. Become an expert and explore on your own books. There are 3 of each. Remember, there are 2 parts per unit, so after reading the informational text for Part 1, follow the same steps, Big Ideas and Inquiry, read informational text for Part 2. Then it's time to write and wrap up. In first and second grade, all print components for each unit will be housed in a kit like you see here. As you see, it's very similar to the kindergarten box. All of your big books will be found here in the back of the kit. This drawer contains all of your teaching materials, and all of your student books are here. There are 12 units available for first and second grade. 4 units for each of the areas of science: earth, life, and physical. For each unit, students will be working with a Big Ideas book, a science inquiry book. They will also have access to 3 Become an Expert books per unit and 3 Explore on Your Own books per unit. You will have 1 teacher's edition for each unit found in the drawer. The Big Ideas book and Big Idea cards will guide your instruction for each unit. A Write About Science Big Book is also provided to guide the writing instruction. In the drawer, you will also find your Learning Masters and Assessment Handbook. Each unit has its own science inquiry kit that contains all of the materials you need for every inquiry activity in that unit. Students will also have access to their own account on MyNG Connect. Here they will be able to listen to the Big Ideas and Become an Expert books online, access the digital library, and play games related to the science they are learning. And of course, you will also have your account that allows you to access all NG Science resources. As you will see, the instructional path for the units in grades 1 and 2 are the same as what we saw in the kindergarten, beginning with the setting up of the science notebook, an introduction to an NG scientist through the unit launch video, followed by the Big Ideas instruction and science inquiry lessons. Then students will read the informational text before writing and wrapping up the unit. Now, as you saw in kindergarten through grade 2, we had a lot of little books for little hands. But in 3rd through 5th grade, the program grows up with the students. At each grade level, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, students will have 3 separate Big Idea books: Earth Science, Life Science, and Physical Science. They will use 1 science inquiry and writing book all year long as they work through the inquiry activities per grade, and they will have access to a variety of Explore on Your Own books per unit. As for the teacher components for 3rd through 5th grade, they are very similar to the K2 components. You will have 1 teacher's edition for each unit: Earth, Life, and Physical. There is also a Science Methods and Process Skills Big Book and Teacher's Guide that's used to build scientific literacy for your future scientists. And just like K2, you will also have Learning Masters and an Assessment Handbook, and a Science Inquiry Kit for each unit. Students will also have access to their own account on MyNG Connect. Here they will be able to listen to NG Science selections online, access the digital library and various enrichment activities, and play games related to the science they are learning. And of course, you will also have an account that allows you to access all of your NG Science resources. The instructional path for 3rd through 5th grade is similar to what we've seen with K2, beginning with the science notebook and the unit launch. However, at this level, we begin by introducing students to the big idea questions they will be studying throughout the unit before we meet the scientists and watch the unit launch video. Since students at this level will be reading more of their text on their own, the strategies for reading informational text that were covered in grades K2 in the Read Informational Text section are embedded into the Big Ideas instruction. And the Big Ideas instruction is broken down into chapters. In grades 3 through 5, the Become an Expert informational text is built in, but they do have the additional Explore on Your Own leveled readers. Now, one component that is the same at all levels is the Teacher's Editions, and at every level you will have one Teacher's Edition per unit. When you open the front cover of the Teacher's Edition, you will see some colored tabs. The first 2 tabs are the same at every level: Nature of Science, Science Notebooks, then Big Ideas. But in the K2 Teacher's Editions, you have 2 additional tabs: Read Informational Text and Write and Wrap Up. Don't worry, if you teach grades 3 through 5, you will still be covering these 2 skills. It's just built right into the Big Ideas instruction. As I just mentioned, the first tab in every Teacher's Edition is the Nature of Science, Science Notebook tab. In this section, you will have access to detailed information regarding the importance of setting up and using a science notebook with NG Science. At every level, the first step in each unit is to spend time setting up the science notebook. So let's learn more about this element of the program. The next slide takes you directly to the National Geographic Science Author Monographs and Podcasts page. The session will pause automatically and give you time to allow for the steps on this slide to learn more about using a science notebook from Dr. Malcolm Butler. Science notebooks are an integral part of the NG Science program. Effective use of science notebooks helps improve student understanding of science content and process and reading comprehension scores on state standardized tests. It gives students an opportunity to record observational data and develop inquiry skills while serving as a context for developing literacy. And just like real scientists, students get to record their observations and share their data with colleagues and peers. Now let's take a look at some examples of science notebooks from real NG Science classrooms. When it comes to setting up your science notebooks, there are many options. This teacher has a spiral notebook for each student, and she uses index cards to separate each section of the unit. This teacher uses a 3-ring binder, which makes it easy for students to insert pages when necessary, and plastic sheet protectors are used so students can store some of their work. A composition book is another option, and you can see the little pink tab that's used to divide the units. Also, notice how this teacher combines the learning masters from NG Science by gluing or taping them into the book and original student work. And this teacher has taped a Ziploc baggie to the inside of her notebooks so students can store their vocabulary words in a safe place. When it comes to what's in the science notebook, there are a few key elements you want to make sure students are recording. The first is their notes and thoughts about the big ideas of science. The examples on the left come from students in second grade, and the examples on the right are from students in fourth grade. As you can see, each of these examples in some way represents the big ideas that students are learning about in the unit they are currently studying. Take a moment and look at these examples. The next element in the science notebook is the new vocabulary students are learning. Throughout the program, they will be learning both science process vocabulary, such as observe and compare, and science content words, such as matter and or volume. Again, the two examples on the left come from second graders, and the two on the right from fourth graders. Throughout your teacher's editions, you will find references to the science notebook, and at times you may want to include some of the Learning Master pages like what you see here. The third element, content notes and review, mostly relates to second through fifth grade students. Students should be encouraged to jot down notes from each lesson in their science notebook. Let them know they can include graphic organizers, charts, lists, questions, and sketches. In your teacher's edition, suggestions for note-taking appears at point of use. The final key element found in an effective science notebook is the observations and notes they take during the inquiry activities. Writing what they will learn will help students understand why they are doing the activity and what it teaches them. Again, the two examples on the left come from second graders and the two on the right from grade 4. As you begin to work with your students in their science notebooks, remember to model what science notebooking looks like. Keep your own science notebook as a model for your students. Allow students to take ownership of their science notebooks so they feel comfortable using them and understand that sometimes in science there are no wrong answers. Keep in mind, as students progress through the program from year to year, they will continue to gain experience with science notebooks, making it easier to get started each year. Now, speaking of using those science notebooks to record inquiry activities, as previously mentioned, National Geographic Science provides students with abundant and relevant hands-on explorations to facilitate a thorough understanding of key science concepts. The 4 levels of inquiry in NG Science are designed to help students build confidence and competence in scientific thought and inquiry. Each unit begins with an explore activity, ends with an open inquiry investigation, and has multiple directed inquiry and guided inquiry investigations in between. The next slide takes you directly to the NG Author Monographs and Podcasts page. The session will pause and allow you time to follow the steps on this slide to strengthen your foundational knowledge in the levels of inquiry by reading Dr. Judy Lederman's author monograph. According to Dr. Lederman, the National Science Education Standards for Science as Inquiry suggests that these 5 abilities are necessary for elementary students to do scientific inquiry. They must be able to ask questions about objects, organisms, and events in the environment. They should be able to plan and conduct a simple investigation to answer that question. They need to know how to use simple equipment and tools to gather data and use that data to construct a reasonable explanation. And finally, they need to be able to share their results. With National Geographic Science, students will experience all 4 levels of inquiry with each unit. Using their student inquiry books, big or small, the unit inquiry kit, and of course their science notebooks. Let's learn a little bit more about each level. With every inquiry activity, there will always be a problem or question, a procedure, and a solution. When it comes to the 4 levels of inquiry, the variable for teachers and teaching science is to determine how much is given to students to structure or guide their investigation. This chart provides a quick and easy visual representation of what is given to the students at each level. With Explore, we see that everything is given to the students. In directed inquiry, students are given the problem or question and the procedure, but are left to develop their own conclusions. With guided inquiry, the only thing provided to the students is the problem or the question. And with open inquiry, everything is left to the students to choose. National Geographic Science uses a scaffolding model of gradual release from known conclusions and teacher direction toward more responsibility and opportunities for students to ask and plan to answer their own questions during investigation activities related to the big idea questions being studied. As you can see, the levels of inquiry transition responsibility from the teacher to the student, with scaffolding support to help students move toward their own inquiry investigations. Directed inquiry is a more teacher-centered approach, while in guided inquiry, the teacher guides students through the investigation. Open inquiry transitions to a student-centered approach. Students cannot be expected to successfully complete a guided activity without plenty of experience with exploration and directed inquiry activities. In the Explore activity, teachers organize learning of simple scientific principles and directly give students the question, specific steps, and correct interpretation. While students build background knowledge, engage in explorative activities, and learn how to recognize testable questions, safely design a plan, collect and analyze data, and form evidence-based conclusions. A simple definition of the Explore level is confirmation of a principle through an activity in which the results are known in advance. Take a moment to read the steps on the slide. If you have some of these materials, go ahead and pause the session to grab them and follow the steps. In this example, you already know what is going to happen when you push the ball. At the same time, this simple activity is helping to build your background knowledge and providing an example of how to design a plan and collect and analyze data. Exploration always happens first to build background knowledge and to stir up interest in questions that will be investigated with subsequent levels of inquiry. These activities are pretty straightforward, and the end result is pretty much guaranteed. With directed inquiry activities, the problem and procedure are given directly, but the students are left to reach their own conclusions. Students are often asked to make predictions about what they believe will be the outcome of the investigation. In this type of activity, students investigate a problem presented by the teacher using a prescribed procedure that is also provided by the teacher. Here, they now have the opportunity to develop their own conclusions by analyzing the data and coming up with their own evidence-based conclusions and recording them in their science notebooks. Directed inquiry is the typical cookbook, follow the recipe kind of activity that you are probably most familiar with. Directed inquiry activities are exactly what the name says, directed. The teacher directs the students through each part of the activity. As I said, in a directed inquiry activity, the teacher gives the problem and procedure directly to students, and the students develop their own conclusions by analyzing data. If we continue with our ball rolling example, here I am presenting you with a problem. How far will the ball roll on different surfaces? And providing you with a step-by-step procedure for finding the answer. But it is really up to you to develop your own conclusion. Notice that I was literally giving you the steps one at a time. This is the do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it level. With guided inquiry, the research problem or question is provided as the students begin their investigation. The teacher is there to provide support and monitor their selections of methods, materials, data organization and analysis, and conclusions. During this level of inquiry, students have the opportunity to apply their analytical skills to support their own evidence-based conclusions to the questions being investigated. Guided inquiry provides opportunities for students to take more responsibility during the investigation. Students may have choices of methods, materials, data organization and analysis, and conclusions. Again, in guided inquiry, the research problem or question is provided, but students are left to devise their own methods and solutions. So, if we continue with our example, I would simply provide you with a new question, and based on the materials you have or can find, you would develop your own procedure for answering that question. In open inquiry, problems as well as methods and solutions are left open. The teacher's role is to support students as they select their questions, methods, materials, and so on. The goal is for students to take full responsibility for all aspects of the investigation. These activities involve students in formulating their own research questions, developing procedures to answer their research questions, collecting and analyzing data, and using evidence to reach their own conclusions. The ultimate goal for elementary students is not to make all inquiry activities open inquiry investigations. Rather, teachers should strive for a mix of inquiry levels appropriate to the abilities of their students. However, providing students only with activities at exploration levels denies them the opportunity to develop and practice important inquiry skills and gives them an incomplete view of how science is done. It is only with experience with all of these levels and methods of scientific inquiry that our students will achieve the ultimate goal of becoming scientifically literate. Since open inquiry is where students take full responsibility for all aspects of the investigation, in continuing with our example, I would simply provide you with a few questions to choose from, or you could make up those questions on your own. Now, at any level, inquiry can be daunting for a teacher. So National Geographic Science provides you with lots of support for doing inquiry. The inquiry activity kits supply almost everything you need for each unit investigation in labeled bags and one box. And in your teacher's edition, there is the Manage the Investigation box at the bottom of every inquiry activity. As you can see, this section lays out everything you need to know before you get started. How much time will it take? How do I group my students? What advanced preparation do I need to do? What can I expect as a result of the activity? Because as a teacher, you need to know how the activity is supposed to turn out, and teaching tips for working through the activity. In your teacher's edition, you will find this icon at the top of every page. This reminds you that there are additional teacher tips available on MyNG Connect in an MP3 or PDF format. When you've completed this portion of the Getting Started with NG Science session, you will want to be sure to watch the Getting Started with MyNG Connect for Science video. This short video will walk you through the online resources that are available for both you and your students. To begin customizing NG Science to fit your schedule, you will also want to watch the Getting Started with the Online Lesson Planner video. These videos can be found on the on-demand training page directly under the link you used to view this session. Congratulations! You have almost completed the first on-demand module for NG Science. This session provides you with an overview of NG Science and all of its program components. We also discussed the importance of using science notebooks and studied the 4 levels of inquiry. And I just piqued your interest in the online resources available on MyNG Connect, which leads you to your next steps. Before your next session, study your National Geographic Science Teachers Edition. Become familiar with all of the components you will be using, and plan some time to view the remaining on-demand modules related to your grade level, including the MyNG Connect videos.